Welcome back. So let's begin with meditation, another meditation from the book. So the name of this one in the book is Embracing Common Humanity. That it seems to be what we normally call in the Tibetan tradition, equalizing self and others. So I spoke about that earlier, where we think that others or another person is basically just like me. They want to be happy, they don't want to suffer. So we contemplate what we share, what we have in common as human beings. And this can really help to dissolve barriers between ourselves and others and just feel closer to others, more equal with others. And that is very, very important, to have compassion and love. So begin by sitting comfortably. And I think by now you should know how to settle yourself down and let go of other thoughts in your mind. So a good way to do that is focusing on the breathing, our breath, because our breath is happening in the present, right here, right now. Not in the past, not in the future, but right in the present. So when we focus on our breathing, just be aware of our breathing coming in and going out, then naturally our mind is in the present place, present moment. So spend a few minutes doing that. And if other thoughts come into the mind, which they probably will, try not to be bothered or distracted by them. Remember the analogy of clouds. And our mind is like the sky, like space, clear, spacious. And thoughts, memories, emotions, and so forth are like clouds. They come and they go. They're not always there. They're not solid. So remembering that analogy, just let go of other thoughts and keep returning to the breathing. So we'll spend a few minutes doing that and then go into the meditation. So now we're going to begin the guided meditation. But even during this meditation period, try to keep your focus on the meditation itself. Other thoughts might arise that are not related to the meditation, or you might hear sounds and your attention could be distracted. So when that happens, do the best you can to let go of, put aside this other thought or sound, and return to the meditation. So we should try to have concentration as much as possible, even when doing an analytical meditation like this. So begin by bringing to mind someone you care about, someone you have natural feelings of love and kindness and care. So it could be a family member, a friend, or a pet. And you might have many people you have such feelings for, but just choose one for now. And if you can, imagine that person or being in front of you as if they're present with you right now. But if it's difficult to visualize, it's enough just to think of that person. You might picture them where they are right now. Try to have a mental picture of them. And focusing your mind on that person, just allow your positive feelings to arise. The good feelings you normally have regarding that person as dear and precious and someone you really care about. You want them to be happy, to do well, to not have problems, pain, bad experiences. Just allow those feelings to come up in your mind or in your heart. And now contemplate how, even though we are different, that other person and myself, we have different bodies, different experiences. There's many things that are different about us, but there are certain things that are the same, common. And one of those is we both want to be happy, have good experiences, and we want to not suffer or have any bad experiences. So this is something we both feel, we both share. We try to get a sense of that. And now bring to mind another person. This time someone you are not so close to. So it's somebody you know, could be a neighbor or somebody you work with, somebody who works in a shop or bank where you often go. So you see this person often, maybe sometimes share some words with each other, friendly words, but you don't know them very well, you're not really close to them. So bring to mind someone like that. And if you can, have a mental picture of that person, either in front of you or wherever they may be right now. This is, again, a person who's different from you. They have a different body, a different mind, thoughts, feelings, experiences. They've done different things in their life, are doing different things now. So we are different, that person and oneself. But we are also the same in certain ways. And again, one way is wanting happiness, good experiences, wanting to not suffer, to not have bad experiences. So contemplate that. See if you can get a sense that that is how the person thinks and feels. And that's probably the driving force in their life. Everything they do is an attempt to find happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction, and to avoid suffering, pain, problems. Now, bring to mind a third person. This time, someone you have difficulty with, someone you find annoying, irritating, difficult to like. It could be someone you actually know and interact with, or it could be someone like a politician or a celebrity, someone you just see on TV or read about in the news. But your mind is closed to that person, and you have negative feelings towards them. Don't think of your worst enemy. That might be too difficult. So think of someone towards whom your negative feelings are mild, low level, not extreme. And when you've thought of such a person, again, try to have a mental picture of them, either imagining they are in front of you, or you can think of them wherever they may be right now. And then contemplate how this person is basically just like you and just like the other two people you thought about. Deep down inside of their heart, they have the wish to be happy, to be satisfied, to fulfill their needs and their wishes and have good experiences. And at the same time, they don't want any pain, sorrow, unhappiness, problems, bad experiences. And the things that the person does that you may find annoying, irritating, or you may even think are wrong, bad, are probably just that person's way of trying to find happiness and fulfill their needs and trying to avoid suffering and problems. It could be that because of experiences they had in their life, in their family, growing up, at school, at work. Maybe they had some painful experiences, and that led the person to behave in the way that they do. It was like their attempt to avoid suffering and problems and find happiness. So even if you find this difficult to understand, to accept at this point in time, try to at least think, yeah, maybe it's true. And I need to think about it some more. Get used to that idea. And also try to understand that if you could think this way, if you could see other people and other beings as basically just like you, trying to be happy, trying to avoid suffering, that this could be very helpful for you. to open up your heart more to others, be able to get along better with others, and even have more love and compassion for others. Okay, so you can slowly come out of meditation, open your eyes. So here in this meditation, we only thought of 3 people. However, if you do this on your own, you can do as many people as you wish. In fact, I was reading a book. There's one American author, Jeffrey Hopkins. He's probably one of the first Americans or Westerners to start studying Tibetan Buddhism with Tibetan Lamas. And he started when he was still a university student back in the 60s, I believe. And his first teacher was a Mongolian Lama who lived in New Jersey, a refugee. And this Lama taught him this practice of, thinking of people and contemplating that just like me, they want to be happy, they don't want to suffer. And he said that after learning this instruction, he stayed up all night doing this meditation. And he went all the way back in his life, as far back as he could remember, and, thought about all the people he's known in his life, starting with his mother, his father, his brothers, and then other family members, and so on, neighbors. And he just went, from the beginning of his life and thinking about all the different people he has known and met, right up to the present. And with each person, he contemplated that, yeah, this person is basically just like me. They want to be happy, they don't want to suffer. And then he brought it up to the present, and he thought about, people who he sees driving around in their cars and in the supermarket and so on. So I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing, to spend that much time in such detail, really going into detail. And then later, when he started teaching, he himself became a teacher, and people wanted to learn meditation, he would teach them this meditation. So I think it's easy to see how this could be very profound and very helpful in dealing with other people, especially the difficult ones, the ones we find annoying or maybe frightening as well. We may sometimes feel frightened of certain people because of the way they look, the way they act. But if we think, that's just another person like me, another human being, thoughts and feelings, and they just want to be happy and don't want to suffer just like me. In the book, Thupten Jinpa tells a story about one man who was a veteran, who had fought in one of the wars, and he did this compassion training program, And he found this particular meditation most helpful for him because he had a lot of anger. And he tried all kinds of therapy and treatment, but this meditation really helped him. It gave him a tool that helped him deal with his anger. And he would sometimes get angry when he saw somebody acting in an unfair way. For example, in the supermarket, when you're in a line in the supermarket, sometimes somebody will come and, you know, push their way in front of the line. Or when you're driving around in a parking lot, trying to find a parking space for your car, and then somebody else comes really fast and takes a space before you can get there. So in those kind of situations, he would get very angry and even would sometimes even assault the person who behaved that way. And so after learning this method, he would use it. So when he saw somebody acting in an unfair way like that, he would just say to himself, just like me, he too wishes to be happy and avoid suffering. So it was like a mantra. He would repeat this to himself like a mantra, and it would help him to calm down. So that's one story of how this method can be helpful. And also in my experience, I've found it helpful in dealing with animals and insects that I find frightening or repulsive. Cockroaches, for example. I don't feel happy when I see cockroaches. So when I've lived in places where there's been cockroaches and I see them, I feel quite scared and repulsed. It's something about them that just find, ew. But then when I contemplate, this is a sentient being. It's not a human being, but Buddhism says even animals and insects, birds, fish, and so on, all creatures have mind, have thoughts and feelings. And all of us have the wish to be happy, to fulfill our needs and our wishes, and to avoid suffering. And that's obvious. You know, anytime if there's an ant or a fly or a mosquito around, if you just move towards them, make a movement towards them, they immediately move away. They don't want to be hurt. They don't want to be killed. They want to protect their lives just as we do. So thinking in that way, this is just another being, another creature who wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer like me. So that really helped me to overcome aversion and fear towards creatures, certain creatures. And I can see over the years, my mind has really changed. Now when I see an insect, even if it's an insect that's kind of ugly, repulsive, frightening, my feeling, my instinctive, immediate feeling is to protect it from harm. You know, I don't want to step on it. I don't want to hurt it. I want to remove it to some place where it can fly away, be safe and protected. So I'm really happy to see how my mind has changed in that way. And I no longer feel aversion and hatred and any wish to harm, and instead just the opposite, wish to protect. So I can see that, getting familiar with these methods for cultivating love and compassion, or at least non-harmfulness, they do work. They do bring about a change in your mind. His Holiness the Dalai Lama often says, try to help other people and other beings as much as you can. Be as helpful as you can to others. And if you can't help them, at least don't harm them. That's a really good little recipe or piece of advice to bring into our life and into our relationships and our interactions with other people and other beings. Try to be as helpful as possible and at least try not to harm. So if you can't help, at least don't harm. And I mean, one thing that's really helpful in if you do want to cultivate more compassion and love is to compose motivation. You can use your own words, but some kind of motivation that you can recite in the morning when you first wake up and before you start doing lots of other things, going to work and so on. But just start your day with a little bit of reflection, a little bit of motivation, and make it something about compassion. For example, like, what I do, I say, today, as much as I can, may I be helpful to others. May everything that I do today, may it be as helpful to other beings as possible. And may I not harm anybody. May I not do anything harmful to anyone as much as possible. And may everything I do help me get closer to enlightenment. So that's what I do. And that's something I've kind of composed on my own. So you could do it on your own. You could write your own motivation, or you could take one from the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche or some other Lama. And just, in the beginning, you might need to read it, but eventually you'll know it by heart. And you can just recite it. And it's good to start the day that way. Some kind of attitude of kindness, compassion, and non-harmfulness. And then if you can, remember to do it, but during the day, several times during the day, you can remind yourself of that. Remind yourself of that motivation. In the book, Geshe Jinpa mentions a doctor that he knows. And when the doctor is washing his hands in between one patient and another, while washing his hands, he'll remember his motivation to help others as much as he can. So you can use little things like that when you have a break in your work or whatever, just to remind yourself so you don't forget that motivation. But yeah, over time, it starts to sink in, and it really does start to bring about changes in our mind, our heart, and in particular in our way of relating to other people and other beings. So to continue with the material that we were going through, I have a few more things to say. We were talking about fear, fear of compassion, and why people do have fear. One fear people sometimes have is that if they're compassionate to others, others will become dependent on them. And I don't think that's good. So again, Thupten Jinpa said that's a misunderstanding of compassion. Compassion doesn't mean we have to do everything for somebody and then they are like helpless and become dependent on us. That's not compassion. I'm sure many of you are parents. You've had the experience of bringing up children. So when children are very, very small, of course, we have to do things for them because they don't know how to, prepare food, put on their clothes and so on. So we have to do those things for a child when they're very small. But as the child gets older, then they need to learn how to do those things for themselves. It's not good for us to do everything for them all the time. Otherwise, they'll never be able to live on their own and take care of themselves. So if you're a good parent, a wise parent, you teach your child to take care of themselves, do things for themselves, and not let them become totally dependent on you. And the same with when they go to school, they're learning, and they have to learn how to do their homework by themselves. I mean, if you go in there and you do their homework for them, that's not helpful. They're not going to learn that way. So being compassionate means helping people to help themselves, empowering. We have this expression, empowering people so that they are able to take care of themselves and do things for themselves. So it doesn't mean making people dependent on you. That's a misunderstanding of compassion. And another misunderstanding with regard to compassion is that when we have compassion and we're trying to help people, if we expect ourselves to be able to fix everybody's problem for them, that's a misunderstanding. Compassion doesn't mean that we have to fix every problem there is. It's simply not possible, for one thing. But we sometimes have this expectation. For example, in my own case, one of my brothers is an alcoholic, and this started when he was very young. He was still a teenager. He started drinking. And so for most of his life, he's had this problem of being addicted to alcohol. And sometimes he'll stop for a while, but then he starts again. And it's created huge problems in his life. He's even committed crimes and ended up in jail. He's lost jobs. He's been thrown out of places where he lived and spent time living in his car. Really awful things happened to him because of his addiction. And in the beginning, I wanted so much to help him and, get him to stop drinking. And I worried a lot. I had a lot of worry and anxiety about it. But then after some time, I realized I can't do that for him. I can't make him stop. He knows it's not good. He knows he should stop, but it's sometimes just so hard, just so strong. So, I do what I can, and I offer him love and support and prayers and, things like that. But I've also come to accept that I can't fix that problem for him. I can't make him stop. So I had to come to that kind of the hard way by, experiencing a lot of worry, sadness, frustration, and so on. But yeah, this is something we need to understand, that all we can do is try to help people who have problems, but we may not be successful. We may not be able to remove their problems, to fix their problems, to make everything okay. So this is something we have to accept. We have to understand. And what was helpful for me was also looking at the life of the Buddha. And Buddha was somebody with this incredible wisdom and knowledge and qualities and compassion. But some of the people around the Buddha were quite negative. When one of his cousins, in fact, a cousin of his who became part of his community, his Sangha. His name was Devadatta. He was very jealous of the Buddha. He didn't like the Buddha. He was antagonistic. He even, a few times, even tried to kill the Buddha. He was really a bad character. And even though he was right there, close to the Buddha, and the Buddha couldn't change his mind. It's just not possible for anyone, even a Buddha, to go into somebody's head or into their mind and fix it, make it different than it is. That's simply not possible. So if even the Buddha can't do that, how can I do it? So this is what I say to myself when I try to help somebody and I'm not successful. I just say, well, even if I was a Buddha, I wouldn't be able to change this person, fix this person's problems. So that's something we need to understand with regard to compassion. Compassion means we wish for others to be free of their suffering and their problems. We wish to be able to help them. We try to help them, but we may not be able to fix the problem and make everything okay. So I hope that's clear. So that can save us a lot of suffering, a lot of frustration, a lot of, what's the word? Burnout. Yeah, we just do what we can. And then, yeah, the last point in that section on fear of compassion, the last bullet point says, it takes courage to be compassionate, but compassion gives us courage. So a certain amount of courage is required to be compassionate, like to reach out and help somebody who's in need. I was also thinking about one incident or time in my life when I was a teenager in secondary school. And some girls in my school were volunteering to go into, we call it an old people's home, a place where elderly people are living, people who can't take care of themselves. And so they need to live in this facility and be taken care of by nurses and staff and so forth. So these girls would go in to this facility and talk with the residents and, just be very friendly and cheerful. And because many of the people were lonely, and so to cheer them up. And I knew about this and I thought, wow, what a nice thing to do. But I was frightened. I thought, I wouldn't know what to say to those people. I don't know who they are. I'm shy by nature. I'm quite shy. So the idea of going to complete strangers who I don't even know and chatting with them, being friendly and cheerful with them, I don't know how to do that, even though I wanted to. So in that case, I was afraid. But also, it was just a lack of knowledge and a lack of skill and a lack of training in how to do that. Now I would feel quite differently, having had much more experience and also not being so shy as I was in the past. And learning how to talk to people, even complete strangers. Compassion definitely gives us courage. So the more we can cultivate this compassion, this wish to help others, to bring them happiness, to relieve their suffering, that does give courage. In fact, there's an interesting story. There's a book called The Art of Happiness. It's probably in French. It's been around quite a few years. It's written by an American psychologist, Howard Cutler, and he's having discussions with the Dalai Lama about different topics. So in one part of the book, he's talking about fear and how, yeah, this is a big problem for many people. They're afraid. And one of the things people are often afraid of is public speaking, having to get up in front of a group of people and talk. He says, for some people, that's more frightening than death. They're more afraid of public speaking than they are afraid of dying. And so he asked the Dalai Lama, I said, because the Dalai Lama gets up in front of audiences that are thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. In India, sometimes it's 100,000 or 200,000 people. And the Dalai Lama is in front of all these people having to talk. And so Howard Cutler asked the Dalai Lama, do you ever feel scared when you have to talk in front of so many people? And the Dalai Lama said, yes. Hard to believe. But he said, but then I realized the fear comes from concern about myself. What will people think of me? Will I do a good job? Will they like me? Or will they criticize me and, think I'm not a good speaker or something like that? And that's very true. That's where that fear is coming from. How will I look? What will they think? Will I look good or not? Will I do a good job or not? So it's very much about me. So the Dalai Lama said, so what he does is he'll think about the people in the audience and generate compassion for them. He'll think, all these people are coming to see me, to listen to me. I want to do something for them. I want to do something that will be beneficial for them, to make them happy. So he focuses, instead of focusing on me, he focuses on them, the people, and generates this compassionate wish to benefit them. And he says that takes away his fear. So I think that's a good example of how compassion gives us courage. And Howard Cutler said, after hearing that from the Dalai Lama, he passed it on to one of his patients, who was a young man. And this young man was very, very shy. He wanted to talk to girls and, invite them for a date, but he was so frightened that they might reject him. And so he was just terrified of talking to girls. So then Howard Cutler told the young man what the Dalai Lama had said, think about the girl and have the wish for her to be happy. What will be good for her? Focus on her. And he did that. So the young man did that and found, yeah, it did help. It helped him to overcome his shyness. And then he was able to talk to the girls. So I think that's a good example of how compassion can give us courage. So we do need a certain amount of courage to be compassionate, act compassionately. But on the other hand, if we can have compassion, it gives us courage. Okay, so we're just about time for a break. Yeah, maybe before jumping into something else, we could stop at this point and have a break, 5-minute break. Okay, so I think we can start again. Someone had sent a question, I think it was yesterday, about how to have compassion for somebody who has harmed you. So I thought I'd talk about that. So as you can understand, it's not so difficult to have compassion for people we get along with, your children. If you're a parent, it's very easy to have compassion for them, or your other family members, friends. So there's certain people that it's easy to have compassion for, but there are people for whom it's very difficult to have compassion. Those who harm us or have harmed us in the past, and those who harm other people that we care about. We hear about acts of violence, acts of harm, and it's just natural that we feel anger towards those who do those harmful actions. And in a way, that kind of anger is connected with compassion. This is my own opinion. I haven't heard my teachers say this, but you have compassion for the victims, the ones who are being harmed. You don't want them to suffer. So there's a certain amount of compassion there. However, the ones who do harm, they deserve compassion too. According to Buddhism, everybody deserves compassion because everybody's suffering. Everybody has suffering. So in the case of yourself, if you have been the recipient of someone else's harm, first of all, you do need to take care of yourself. So you need to have compassion for yourself. You do not deserve to be treated in a harmful way. And I'm saying that because I hear about women in particular who get abused by their husband or their partner. And sometimes they just stay in that situation and allow themselves to continue getting hurt, getting abused. For me, it's difficult to understand why. There could be different reasons why. One reason might be if you have very low self-esteem and you think you don't deserve anything better than that. I met one woman many years ago who told me that her husband used to beat her and do other awful things to her. And he would say to her, "I can't help it because you are so bad. I can't help but act this way. You make me act this way." And she believed it. So for many years, she stayed in that situation thinking it was her fault. Until finally, I don't know how long it took her to realize this, but I think she was talking to a therapist. And then she woke up and realized, no, it's not my fault. And I don't have to put up with this. So she finally left. But anyway, this does happen. It does happen that people sometimes allow themselves to be harmed for whatever reason, but that is not right. Nobody deserves to be treated that way. And also, like I said, some other point, it's not compassionate to let somebody behave that way because they're creating bad karma. They're creating bad karma. They're creating the cause for themselves to suffer in the future. That's not good for them. Also, if they get away with harming you, then they may get the confidence that, oh yeah, I can behave this way. And they may start doing it to other people as well. So then other people will get harmed by that person. So you're sort of supporting conditions for others to also be harmed. So it is not compassionate to let people do harmful things. So if you are in a relationship where that's going on, you need to get yourself out of that relationship, get help if you need. So yeah, I mean, not everyone needs professional help. Some people may be able to heal themselves on their own, but you know, if you've been abused, especially if it's gone on for a long time, you might need professional help from a therapist. There's, I think, a lot of resources. Most cities provide resources for women who've been abused. I've heard some cases also of men being abused by their wives. That does happen. It's probably rare, but it does happen too. So whatever gender you may be, you could be abused by a partner or spouse. Okay, so take care of yourself, get yourself out of the situation, get help, and also try to get help for the other person. So there are programs, I know here in America, and they must happen, must be everywhere in Europe, programs to help abusers to change that kind of behavior. So try whatever you can to get that person into a program like that. So that's what you need to do to begin with. And then also, ideally, have compassion for this person who's behaving in a harmful way. So one way of doing that is to contemplate how this person is suffering too. They have suffering too. Because if you think about it, when people are in a good state of mind, when they are happy, satisfied, doing well, usually they don't do hurtful things to others. When we do hurtful things to others, it's usually because we're not doing well. We're not happy. Yeah, it could be anger, fear, frustration, jealousy, low self-esteem, a whole range of different emotions going on in the mind that are painful, disturbing. So it's like mental torture. So the person who's doing harmful things is probably being tortured by their own mental afflictions, their delusions. And all of these, according to Buddhism, are based on ignorance, not knowing the reality of things, not knowing the true nature of things, confusion. So contemplate that. Think about how this person is actually not happy, but is suffering, mentally suffering. So if you think about that, that might help you have compassion. Also, if they are doing harmful actions, then if you can accept karma, you believe in karma, that means the person is creating negative karma. And negative karma means you're creating the cause for more suffering, more problems, more bad things to happen to you in the future. So contemplating that. what kind of karma, what kind of experiences this person will have in the future because of the way they're behaving now. There'll be more suffering for them in the future. So if you think about that, contemplate that, that can help clear away anger, hatred, and make space for compassion. So you feel like helping the person rather than harming them. So this may take time. It may not happen the very first time you try to reflect on this. You might you might come against some resistance. Oh, they don't deserve it. They hurt me so much and they hurt. So, so yeah, our feelings of anger will probably come up. And yeah, that's kind of normal in a way. But one thing that's really helpful is to ask yourself, does this anger do any good? Does it do any good to be angry and hateful? And hopefully you'll recognize it doesn't do any good. And in fact, it just makes things worse. Because there's a saying, I can't remember where it came from, but it's like, if somebody says hurtful words to you, they say something hurtful, something insulting to you. So they may say that only one time, on one occasion. But then what happens in our mind is we repeat that again and again and again. He said that, he said that, she said that. So it's like we are, re-experiencing those hurtful words again and again and again. Who's doing that? It's not the other person, it's our own mind. So it's like our own mind. When we don't have any control over our mind keeps repeating those hurtful words. And each time we do, we get hurt again. So we don't have to do that. You do have a choice. You don't have to do that. You can say, okay, that person said such and such. Never mind, let it go. I mean, you may need to do more to work on your feelings there, but don't let your mind keep obsessing about those hurtful things that were done or said to you. That is just making things worse for you. That's just making you suffer over and over and over again. And you don't have to do it. You can do other things with your mind. Yeah. So it's really helpful to recognize how our mind works and how sometimes, not intentionally, our mind just works in such a way that we make ourselves suffer. We make ourselves suffer, and we don't have to do it. So if you can recognize that and say, no, I'm going to stop doing this. I'm not going to do this anymore. It's not good for me. It's not good for anybody. And that's very helpful. So just to recognize how anger is painful, counterproductive, not helpful at all, and look for some other solution, something else to do with your energy rather than obsessing with anger. And if you can't do this on your own, then seek help. Get help from a friend or a therapist or a spiritual teacher. Sometimes it's helpful. I do this too. Sometimes I'm really upset about something. I'll go and talk to one of my friends just to vent. We call it venting, just kind of get that out. And it's not that I really want to hurt anybody. I'm just frustrated and I need to talk to somebody about that. And it does help. It does help to get that out. So sometimes it is helpful to talk to somebody else. And also talking to somebody else can sometimes help you get more clear about what you need to do, what would be skillful and not skillful. So it can help you plan a more positive direction for your energy. And also another thing, we did talk about this already, but just to repeat it, separate the person and their action. And the action, if the person did something harmful, the action is wrong. We condemn the action. We don't condone the action, we condemn the action. We say that action is wrong. However, the person who did that action isn't a bad person. There's nobody who's 100% bad all the time. Everybody has good qualities. Everybody does good things, at least sometimes. So it could be helpful. Think about that. Think about good things that the person has done, good things about the person. And just to realize they're not 100% bad. Sometimes they do bad things, but not always. And the bad things they do, well, that happens because of various causes and conditions, maybe experiences they had when they were a child, with their family, or maybe at school they were bullied. Lots of stories can lead people to behave in hurtful ways. And I mean, it's not to justify what they do now, the hurtful things they do, but just to understand why the person is behaving that way, where they're coming from. And with more understanding, then our mind, our heart will be more soft and more caring and less hateful and judgmental towards them. And also people change. Even if the person has done bad things in the past, doesn't mean they're going to continue doing bad things forever and ever and ever. I read an article about this man in America. He actually wrote a book, From Hate to Love. And he was when he was a teenager and in his early 20s, he was involved in white supremacist groups, if you know what that means. These are groups of people who believe white is best. White people are the best people. Anybody who's not white is bad. So they're called white supremacists. And so he was involved in those groups. He even started a musical group that would play songs with that kind of theme, hate songs, full of hatred towards other races. And they would get into fights. He and his friends would get into fights. People would sometimes even get killed or put into prison. So he was like that for many, many, many years, full of hatred. And finally he changed, fortunately. What happened was he got married and then they had a child, and when a little girl, and looking at his daughter, he thought, if I keep going the way I am, I'm either going to end up dead or in prison. And how will that be for her, for his daughter? And he realized he didn't want to do that to his daughter. So he started changing. He started moving away from that old behavior. And then later, when his daughter was, I don't know, I guess, I'm not sure how old, but anyway, old enough to read, maybe she was about 10 years old, he found her reading a Dalai Lama book. And so he was curious and he looked at the book as well. And so that, introduced him to the Dalai Lama and compassion and meditation. And then he started going down that path. He became a Buddhist, was practicing meditation. So then he turned around completely 180 degrees from the way he used to be. So he wrote a book about his experience. And I just read the article. I didn't read the whole book, but it's so inspiring to see how what's possible. You know, how people can change. And so even if someone is behaving really badly now, doing hurtful things, doesn't mean that they are going to be like that forever and ever. They could change. And in fact, if we can have compassion and love for such people, there's a greater chance that they would change. If we get angry at them, and this is actually what this man said in his writing, he said, when people would be angry at him and his friends, that was just feeding their own anger. That's like pouring kerosene on the fire. It would just make them more angry. But he had some experiences of people treating him with kindness, with compassion, even though he was so full of anger, he was so full of hatred. For example, one story was he was in a McDonald's hamburger restaurant, and the cashier, the person taking the money, was a Black woman, and he had on his finger, you know, this sign that people make when they're angry. I'm not going to make it because it's rude, but anyway, he had on his finger a swastika, a tattoo of a swastika on his finger right there. So he could, you know, make that sign to people that he was angry at. So the cashier saw the swastika on his finger, and she said, "I know you're better than that." And he was just so shocked to meet this compassion in the face of his anger and hatred. Somebody treated him with kindness and compassion. He was just so shocked. He just ran out of there and never went back. But it left an impression on him. It did, it did affect him in some way. And there were a number of other incidents like that where people treated him with kindness in spite of his hatred. And slowly, that is what helped him to change. So if we do want to stop people from doing harm, it's more effective if we can have compassion for them rather than anger and hatred. Even though it's difficult and it may take time, but it's better for us. We'll feel better. But it's also better for the other person. But again, doesn't mean having compassion for someone doesn't mean letting them do whatever they want. We still try to stop their harmful behavior, but we do it without anger or hatred in our heart, and instead with kindness, with compassion. So I hope that's clear. Having compassion doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior. It doesn't mean always saying yes to everybody's requests or demands. It doesn't mean being passive, inactive, doing whatever people want us to do. We can still be very strong, very firm, very assertive, but we do it with a soft, gentle, caring heart. So similar with parents or teachers who have to deal with young children, and children are often naughty, and it's not good to let them get away with bad behavior. You need to teach them, and you sometimes need to be very firm. Say, no, you can't do that. Sit down, we need to have a talk. So you have to be firm, but ideally you do it without anger, without the wish to harm them. Your wish is to help them, to benefit them. So probably most of you have that kind of experience dealing with children or siblings. So that's the ideal attitude to have towards people who do harmful things. Okay, so I think I'll stop there. You've probably heard enough. I do recommend this book. It's a wonderful book. There's lots of material and not just essays, but practices, things that you can practice on your own. And there's also lots of methods in traditional Buddhism, different kinds of methods. I thought we could do one more little meditation before we stop, but maybe some of you have questions that you would like to ask. Oh, actually, there is one more question that somebody had sent. I should take care of that. When trying to develop calm abiding, one of the prerequisites is to have little activities. There is also this idea of removing oneself from the world. How can one conciliate that with compassion that consists in relating to others? That's a good question. It is true that if we want to develop calm abiding, which is a kind of concentration, training the mind to stay focused, concentrated on one object for longer periods of time, it's very hard to do. And they do say that if you want to do that, if you want to attain calm abiding, you do need to stay in a quiet, isolated place. Don't have a lot of interaction with other people, except if there's somebody who's helping you, bringing you food and so forth, taking care of your needs, or if there's somebody else who's meditating, also you can have interaction with them, but not interacting with ordinary people in ordinary ways, not listening to the news. So, because that's just going to create a lot of distractions in your mind and you'll have trouble concentrating. So that is true. However, it's still possible, even in that kind of situation, to have compassion. And in fact, ideally, one does have compassion as one's motivation for developing calm abiding. Because, different people might have different reasons for cultivating concentration. Some do it just to, have that wonderful experience for themselves. They may not be doing it in order to benefit others, but that isn't the case in Mahayana Buddhism. So in Mahayana Buddhism, we cultivate concentration because it's a very important state of mind. We need to know how to keep our mind concentrated so that when we do other meditations, such as cultivating wisdom, cultivating compassion, cultivating loving kindness, and so on, we'll be able to do it in a very focused way. Because if our mind is just scattered all over the place, then our meditation practices will not be very effective. So the whole purpose for cultivating concentration in Mahayana Buddhism is to benefit others, to follow the Bodhisattva's path and eventually reach enlightenment and benefit all sentient beings. Concentration is one of the necessary elements of that path. So your whole motivation for cultivating concentration is compassion, the wish to benefit others. So it's not contradictory that if you're staying by yourself and trying to cultivate calm abiding, you don't have compassion. Even if you're not interacting with a lot of other people, you can still have compassion in your mind, in your heart. You can be thinking about the world and all the different people and different beings, and feeling compassion for them. And also, I mean, I've spent time in retreat, and even when you're staying all by yourself, there's still beings around you. There's spiders, and there's birds, and there's lizards, and there's people out there. So it's not like, I mean, you can never be totally isolated from all other sentient beings. They're always around. And they're also in your mind. I mean, you know, memories of people come up in your mind. And so you can use those memories to practice compassion. So it's not at all contradictory to practice in a retreat situation, isolated situation, and have compassion. But it's also good. I know one friend of mine spent a long time in retreat. In fact, I think she was in retreat for about 6 years, mostly by herself, mostly isolated. And then she said she got to a point where her compassion kind of dried up. she found it difficult to continue feeling compassion, staying by herself in retreat. So she decided it was time to come out of retreat and be in the world and interact with other people, because there you have more opportunities to feel compassion. So so that's one way of doing it. You spend a certain amount of time in retreat working on cultivating your mind, and you have times when you're more out there in the world with other people, where you can really feel compassion and practice your compassion. Okay. Another question in the chat box. There's one very long one in French.
It's actually a copy pasting of different questions that were on the chat before the break. That we could translate you, but there are quite a few actually.
Yeah, we are running short of time. I mean, this has been only 2 days to look at a topic which is quite complicated. Although compassion itself isn't complicated. What's complicated is us, human beings. We are complicated. And then when each one of us is complicated. We have so many different thoughts and feelings and experiences. And then when we get together with another person who also is very complicated and has lots of thoughts and feelings and experiences, then it's like the complication gets even more complicated. And so, yeah, lots of challenges and difficulties and questions will arise when we do try to put these ideas into practice. We do try to act in a compassionate way in relation to other people. So it isn't always so simple. And we face challenges and difficulties. So try not to get discouraged by that. You know, try to find a solution, figure out what to do. And if you can't find a solution on your own, then talk to somebody, like a teacher, spiritual teacher, or somebody who's studied more, practiced more than you have. And so they may be able to help you figure out a way to deal with this situation. But I think it is also helpful to keep in mind that you can't fix every problem, even if you wish to. You try, you do your best, you try different things, and you know, sometimes you simply have to say, okay, I've done as much as I can. I can't do anymore. You can always pray. I mean, this is one thing. Not everybody believes in prayer, but I do. I think prayer is very helpful. So if somebody's suffering, somebody going through a difficult time, and you get frustrated because you can't help them, you can always pray for them. And sometimes that does help. So, I mean, a simple way of doing that would be to think of the Buddha or Tara, whatever Buddha figure you're most comfortable with, or Jesus or the saints, whoever you feel most faith or confidence in. So think of that person, that being, and pray to them and ask them to help this person who is suffering, this person who's going through difficulties. And in our tradition, we also imagine light. So you could actually imagine the figure, the Buddha figure, above the person you're trying to pray for, and imagine them sending a shower of light, filling them up, cleansing their confusion, their pain, their suffering, their problems, all that getting cleared away, and they get filled up with positive energy. Okay, so then at least you're doing something instead of feeling hopeless and frustrated. And it might help. Lots of stories of prayer being effective, bringing about results. So at least it's something you can do. Okay, so let's do one more short meditation before we finish. This is called appreciating others. I did talk about it a little bit, but let's spend a short time reflecting on it. So the idea of this meditation is we are dependent on others for everything. Without others, we wouldn't have anything. We wouldn't even be here if it weren't for other people. So contemplating that, getting more familiar with that, is very, very helpful for opening our heart to others, caring for others, wanting to help others. So sit quietly. Try to sit up straight. You're probably tired. It's been a long weekend, but just have a short time to go. And sitting up straight can help to bring up your energy if it's drooped a little bit. Just for a few moments, pay attention to your breath, coming in, going out. Put aside or let go of any other thoughts there may be in your mind. Just let your mind rest in the present moment, right here, right now. So we are now adults and we know how to take care of ourselves, unlike small children. Now we may have a sense of, yeah, I don't need other people. I can manage on my own. But even now, even as we're adults, we are still dependent on other people. So let's look at one example of that. Food. Most people like to eat, and we have to eat. Our bodies need food. If we go without food for too long, we'll die. And the food we eat comes from other people. Think about just one meal, maybe what you ate for dinner today or for lunch, one normal meal that you might eat. And there's different ingredients. Some of it, probably most of it, was grown in the earth. Bread, pasta, vegetables, fruit. So all of those things come from crops grown in the earth. Farmers spend many months growing those crops, first planting the seeds at the right time of the year, making sure they get enough water, taking care of the little plants when they start to grow, protecting them from predators, not predators, but maybe creatures like rats or insects that might come and eat the little plants, protecting them from weather if it gets too cold or too hot, and they may need to do additional things to protect the little crops, the little plants. So being a farmer is not easy. A lot of hard work, long hours, sometimes putting up with difficult conditions, heat, cold, rain, snow, insects biting them. And then when the crops are ready, after a number of months, then they need to be harvested. And probably extra people need to come in at that time to harvest the crops, prepare them to be taken to factories or markets. And then there are people working in the factories to transform the raw grains into bread or pasta, things that human beings can eat. And then it goes to the markets, supermarkets, or farmers markets for fresh produce. And again, there's people working in those markets to sell the raw materials, the raw food. So there's many, many people involved in producing even just one plate of food that we eat one time a day. And probably most people don't think about all the people that made it possible for them to have that food. All the time and energy they spent making it possible for that food to be there on our plate and then in our stomach nourishing our body. So if we do think about all those people, we probably feel a sense of appreciation, gratitude. And if we were to meet those people with that awareness of what they have done for us, we would probably want to say thank you. And is there something I can do for you? So that's just one example, but everything else in our life, the clothes that we wear, shoes, coats, hats, the places where we live, work, play, the furniture we sit on, the electronic devices we use, water, electricity, all of these things are made by other people. And if we have the thought, yeah, but they made those things in order to have money, not as a gift to me, doesn't matter what their motivation was, what their thought was. The fact is, we benefit from the work that they did. And if they didn't do that work, we would have a hard time in our life. We might not even be able to survive. Also, others help us in our spiritual practice. If we see the value in learning a spiritual path and practicing a spiritual path, which involves cultivating compassion and love and patience and generosity, these positive qualities. In order to develop those and practice those, we need others. We need other people and other beings as recipients of our love, our compassion, our patience, our generosity. So they provide us with opportunities to cultivate these beautiful qualities that are so fulfilling for ourselves and enable us to follow the spiritual path and eventually reach enlightenment. So ask yourself, if you do wish to reach enlightenment, could you do that without other people, without other beings? And not talking about enlightenment, but just happiness. Could you be happy without other people, without other beings? So this meditation is to help us generate gratitude, appreciation, positive feelings towards others. And that in turn helps us want to treat others with kindness, with respect, with compassion. So let's conclude the meditation and also conclude the weekend course by dedicating the positive energy that we've created, spending all this time listening, thinking about, meditating on, discussing these teachings on compassion. We definitely created a lot of good energy. So let's share this positive energy with others. May it bring them genuine peace and happiness and all the causes of happiness. May it relieve their suffering. May they be free of suffering and the causes of that. And may this help them progress along the path and reach the state of enlightenment, the fulfillment of their highest potential.
Dear Venerable SK, we would like to thank you, on behalf of all the people who have been following your teachings from Friday to Sunday. And then we would like to request you to come and teach us again, through Zoom or in real with your body,
Yeah,
if it's possible.
I want to thank you for inviting me. I love teaching and I love teaching this topic. It's so beautiful. So it's helpful for me to talk about it and think about it and be re-inspired. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. And yes, I would be very happy to do another course. Not too soon because I'm a little busy right now, but maybe next year.
Okay, it's noted. Thank you so much.
Thank you for organizing it. Thanks to Nadia for translating and all of you for joining.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye. Wish you well.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Bye-bye. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Merci. Bonne soirée.
Thank you.